begin with a prayer, and I'll just introduce myself 2 lines. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. I'm sure many of you are familiar with me. Ushaji has asked me to introduce myself. So I am Pravrajika Divyananda Prana of Ramakrishna Sharda Mission, New Delhi. I am a monastic member of Sri Sharda Math, presently stationed in New Delhi. And I am currently the editor of Samvit. I am sure many of you are buying Samvit. If you are not, please subscribe to Samvit and become members so that you get spiritual food from time to time. And as many of you are familiar, I have been quite close to Ushaji because I visited Washington last year and she was there for the retreat. And since then, she had very much wanted me to come to the North Carolina Center. In various ways, she was planning for it. And this year, I was supposed to go again, but due to COVID, we canceled everything. So probably next year, whenever it's possible, we'll make a trip there, Mother willing. And we'll be able to interact with all of you. But just now it will all be only online. So I'm sure many of you are also attending the Atma Bodh classes. First time I'm speaking for the North Carolina Center, and I'm happy to be with all of you. And I'm happy about the topic, Ushaji. Thank you. How to cultivate bhakti. Because that's the most essential thing in the lives of devotees. So today we will discuss that for the next 45 minutes. And after that, we'll take up Q&A based on this. Now, bhakti is the most essential part of a spiritual aspirant's life. This is something all of us realize after some time, that we cannot do without devotion. It may be devotion to an impersonal being, or it can be devotion to the personal God. But whatever it is, bhakti, devotion, becomes all important as we proceed on the spiritual path. So today we will be discussing how to generate, how to cultivate this bhakti. Swami Vivekananda starts his Bhakti Yoga, which is a small but very profound book on bhakti, which all of you must read because it's a small book. He begins his Bhakti Yoga by saying, bhakti is a genuine search after the Lord, a search beginning, continuing, and ending in love. So, since love is so an essential part of our personality, since emotion is a part of our psyche, and for many of us, it's the dominant thing about our psyche. So it is important to channelize this entire thing towards the Supreme in order to proceed in spiritual life. That is why bhakti becomes very important, most important, I would say. Because unless our emotion, our thought, and our will are all functioning in sync, we are not going to go anywhere in spiritual life. Many times we have wonderful thoughts, but our emotions are, well, not worth mentioning, and the will is functioning occasionally in one direction, then it changes direction. So this is no way to proceed in spiritual life. That is why it is so very important to develop all these yogas together. Jnana Yoga to train our thought mechanism, Bhakti Yoga to train our emotion to flow towards the same goal, and Karma Yoga to train our willpower, and Raja Yoga in order to train this entire mechanism, body-mind complex, in order to constantly move forward on the spiritual path. Otherwise, we can become very lopsided. So, Bhakti Yoga becomes very important, not just as a study, but in practice. Today, we are going to dive into how to cultivate this Bhakti. If you go to the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, you will find Sri Ramakrishna repeatedly saying that Bhakti, devotion to the Lord, is Sar Vastu, he would say. It is the very essence of life. It is the joy of life. It is the fulfillment of life. So understanding this very essential aspect of our spiritual life, let us now go step by step into how Sri Ramakrishna, what steps he gives us in order to cultivate bhakti, to cultivate pure devotion to the Lord. See, Sri Ramakrishna has given 6 major points. If you put together all the things which Sri Ramakrishna says on how to cultivate bhakti, he gives us 6 major points, and there are a number of other points also, but these I would say are highlighted in many places. So the first thing is to repeat the name of the Lord and to sing his glories. Now we should not shy away from this. No matter how intellectually equipped we are, no matter what we are doing, what our profession is, to chant the name of the Lord and to sing his glories should be part and parcel of life, because he is after all the Supreme Master. He is the Master, and we are, whatever our bhav, we are his servants. If you don't believe in the personal aspect of the divine, a devotion towards the impersonal aspect, so constantly dwelling on the impersonal aspect of the Lord, singing the glories of that, this should become part and parcel of life. It is always better in Bhakti Yoga and in our initial stages of spiritual progress to worship a personal God, because he comes to us as the Supreme Godhead in a human form, as a Vyakti. Vyakti means one who is Vyakta, who is manifested on this plane. So it becomes easy to relate. So a personal God, bhakti towards a personal God, can quickly take you towards your spiritual goal. Even if the goal is Brahma Jnana, Brahma Vidya, Atma Jnana, still bhakti towards a personal God will integrate your emotion, thought and will and take you forward, because the personal God is nothing but an embodiment, a supremely beautiful embodiment of the impersonal principle. He comes to you in that form so that you can proceed towards him. So understanding this, we must adopt this technique which Sri Ramakrishna gives us, chanting his name and singing his glories. Because whatever you chant, whatever you speak and think about, it is going to leave its impress on your mind. So if it is about the Lord, definitely the impress is going to be very positive. Definitely you are going to create the sanskars required for bhakti. Otherwise it is difficult to do it. If only an occasional thought about the Lord comes into our mind, the rest of the time we are busy with a whole lot of things, it is difficult to proceed. To make this a practice is important, that is why. For those of you who are initiated, you can practice mantra japa, that is chanting the name of the Lord. For those of you who are not initiated, just taking the name of the Lord, that name itself has great power. Please believe in this. Because you believe in something or the other, even in spiritual life. So let us learn to believe in the words of the great master, Sri Ramakrishna, chanting the names of the Lord and singing his praise. Once you start doing this, you will see the amount of joy it creates in your system. And naturally you will understand that this bhav, this intense feeling for the Lord is very useful to you in your spiritual life. So this is the first point he gives us. The second thing he tells us is to cultivate devotion, go into solitude now and then. Now, where do we get solitude in these COVID times especially? So it's difficult, but you can create a special space in your own home where you practice spiritual discipline. Yesterday I was telling about this in the Atma Bodh class also, that if you reserve a room or one particular place in any room only for spiritual practice, whenever you go there, all those divine thoughts will descend upon you, as it were. You are creating the vibrations in that space and they remain there. So it will usher the mood of meditation, of prayer naturally when you go there. So this is solitude. Sri Ramakrishna used to say solitude can be in mone, bone, kone. It can be in your mind, it can be in a forest, it can be in a corner of your room. Anywhere you can practice solitude. Basically, solitude is keeping the mind solitary. So see how you can achieve this, right where you are. And it is here that you will have to practice the chanting and singing of the names of the Lord. Then he says, discriminate between the real and the unreal. Ishwari vastu or shop avastu, Sri Ramakrishna says. The real is only God. If you have any doubts about this, check your own life and see. You need not believe anybody. Does anything last permanently in our lives? Only God is ever there and He will ever remain over. Everything else will pass. So give it that value, that this is the only permanent thing, so it is real. It is eternal. It is ever with me. So my connection with this must be the strongest. My bond here must be the greatest. Because this is the only thing that is going to last. Your connection with God, your bhakti for God, your devotional practices, and the knowledge you gain out of them. This is the only thing that is going to go with us. So make this bond strong by discriminating constantly between the real and the unreal. Because the nature of the mind is to go and get entangled with a whole lot of things. So that does not happen, this vivek, philosophical discrimination, is to be practiced in the mind so that we prioritize the divine in our everyday lives. You see what a practical point this is? A devotee's home, God is prioritized. Please remember this. Then he says prayer. Talking with God, conversation with God, telling Him what you want. Didn't we do this as kids? We wanted something, we would run to our mother and just demand. Or run to the father and just ask for it. So when you want something intensely and you go and ask God, like a child, naturally you know, it can be possible that your mind doesn't wholly want it. But once you ask for it, once you pray for it, your mind will learn to accept it completely. Many times in our spiritual life, we may be asking for samadhi, but our mind is not sure of what it means. But when you keep praying for it, your mind creates space for it, learns to understand it. So prayer does all these things for us. It brings the grace of God. It prepares our mind for what we are asking for. It clears the mind. It brings the devotional mood. Because when you are asking, naturally, you have become like a child. It naturally brings that bhav. And prayer is your connection with God. So make prayer a habit. Sri Ramakrishna used to demonstrate in so many ways how one should pray. And his whole life is like one wonderful deep prayer, profound prayer. He in fact had God realization through prayer, isn't it? That vyakulata and prayer, the intense yearning for God and prayer. This formed his main spiritual practice. Please check and see if this is true or not. So prayer is very powerful. Let me just devote 2 minutes to tell you how one should pray. Because many people don't pray the right way. Although prayer should be a spontaneous something which you tell God, there is a psychological connection between the one who's asking and the one who gives, which is created through prayer. So this is how one ought to pray. You ask God for whatever you want, one-pointedly, completely one-pointed mind. You are not asking for what is ideal according to you. You are asking for your need, what you want. And you can always tell him, I don't know if this is good for me, but I consider this good, so please See to it that I get this. Please make it such that I am able to accept this. Suppose the mind is revolting against bhakti. You can always pray to the Lord for bhakti. Please see that my mind becomes full of devotion. Then all the revolt will go. So once you have made this prayer with a one-pointed mind, you suddenly become very intense, because this thought is nothing but refined vital energy. When it is one-pointed, your vitality has just blossomed completely. So when you have become so intense in your prayer, you must imagine that God is granting that prayer. This is an essential part of prayer. You imagine that it is being given to you and you have accepted it. Once you accept it, your energies will again come back to their normal state. So you prayed and it was delivered to you, your prayer. This is one complete prayer. If you practice this repeatedly, even for a few minutes every day, your whole mind will change. Many times we don't want spiritual things, but we want to want. Isn't this true? Think and see. We may not want spiritual practice. The mind is revolting constantly. We may not want very deep level meditation. We may not want the kind of pure life which spirituality demands, because it's not possible maybe for us just now, but we are wanting to want it. So prayer will generate the essential want in your heart. When you pray to God, this is what I actually want, this is what I need, please grant this to me. Then the space for that is created within you. Your mind learns to accept that fully. The requirements for that, it will learn to accept. And the more your need is, say it is for bhakti, the more you pray, the more it is satisfied. So prayer is from your part, if it is from your side, if it is 100% true, if it is your need at that particular moment, then definitely the answer will come from the divine. It is granted. This assurance has been given in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, in the Bhagavad Gita, in all the scriptures, that God answers prayer. So whatever we want, we can get. There is a way to get it. So establish this connection through prayer. Next, Sri Ramakrishna speaks of holy company for cultivating bhakti. It is almost impossible to cultivate bhakti without a holy ambience, without holy company, because mind influences mind. And the vibrations of God, when you come here and when I take you to Vrindavan, you will understand what I'm trying to point out to. Because the vibrations of that place have become so concentrated through centuries of devotional practice, that plays a huge part in an aspirant's life. Even holy company, a whole lot of people write to me that we are doing sadhu sang through Zoom. So now holy company is all through Zoom. But you must actually go into the presence of a saint. And his mind, the aura around him, will naturally impact your mind and change it for the better. This is to be experienced, to be known. So going into the proximity of holy people, like-minded devotees, this is very important. That helps you cultivate and develop your bhakti. Then there is uniting all your powers of love towards the divine. And Sri Ramakrishna used to give the illustration of loving God even as a child loves its mother. Even as the yearning which a child feels for his mother, the yearning which a man feels for his possessions, a worldly man feels for his possessions, the yearning which a chaste wife feels for her husband. These three yearnings, these three attractions, if you can put together, you will get God, Sri Ramakrishna says. Now, how do we put these three together? See, in every episode of love. I told you, your vitality has things, polarities he mentioned, so that just to make sure that he can never be killed. And he thought he was very smart. So Brahmaji said, Tathastu, so be it. And then Hiranyakashipu was extremely happy, thinking that now nobody can kill him. It's as good as immortality, what he has asked for. Now, when he was performing these austerities and all this was taking place, it so happened that Kayadhu, the palace of the kingdom of Hiranyakashipu was attacked by Indra and the Devas, and they drove away all the Asuras, and Indra wanted to take Kayadhu also to his heavens, but sage Narada, who was a Devarishi, he intervened and said, no, she is with child, and this child is very special. Is a very great devotee of Lord Vishnu. So keep Kayadhu with me. So Kayadhu went with sage Narada to his ashram and started living there. Now the very beautiful holy ambience of that ashram, full of prayer and meditation and worship and the constant chanting of the divine name, all this had great transforming effect on the mother and the child in her womb. So right before Prahlad was born, he was already in the womb of Kayadhu. He was absorbing all these great qualities. He was absorbing great devotion for the Supreme Lord. And sage Narad would continuously talk about the glories of Vishnu. And all of these Prahlad imbibed. So you see, this is an essential aspect of parenting, which is lost to the modern world, isn't it? But these sanskars are there. In many families, even in India, they are followed, that the child in the womb itself absorbs. So if you want a good child endowed with divine attributes, the education starts right from there. And so the mother has to be very careful. Motherhood is the greatest responsibility for women. And if the education starts right from there, right from the womb, then you can be assured of the kind of sanskars your child will get. So you see, Prahlad is a standing example of this. He imbibed all the divine qualities of sage Narad himself because of the proximity he had with him at that period. And then when Hiranyakashipu comes after getting his boons, he comes to take them back home. Then Narad tells him that your son is going to do something very special. So take good care of him. And he said, yes, of course. And he took Kayadhu back to his kingdom, and Prahlad was born there. Now this child, right after his birth, he had such a divine aura around him that everybody came to know that this is something very strange, that such a divine child being born to a Asura king. So anyway, the king also was, Hiranyakashipu also was very proud of Prahlad, and then he every day he doted on his son and celebrated his arrival and did all sorts of celebrities and festivities. And then he began his education quite early. Now for an Asura, all these Asura lads, their kind of education was something totally different, completely sensate civilization. And education also was like that, how to divide and rule, how to cheat people, how to bribe, and how to have all your desires fulfilled by any means. This was the kind of education that was being provided. So he had two tutors, two mentors called Amark and Shan. And these two made sure that Prahlad learned. They tried to make sure that Prahlad learned all that they had to offer. But Prahlad was so different from the other Asura lads and so divine in his expressions, in his moods, that they all felt that this is a very strange child. So they would go occasionally and tell Hiranyakashipu that your child is something very different. And then the other boys in that Gurukul, that was also a Gurukul, they started learning what Prahlad had to say and not what those teachers had to say. So then the tutors were angry and they came to Hiranyakashipu and said that your son is actually not learning what we are teaching him. So then Hiranyakashipu brings Prahlad to him, makes him sit on his lap and says, my son, tell me, what do you know? What have you learned? And Prahlad only says that I have learned that the only purpose of human life is to have devotion to the Supreme Lord Vishnu. Because He is my being, He is your being, He is the all-pervading one, He is the only truth of life. And Hiranyakashipu says, what? This is what kind of a statement is this? He is my enemy, don't you know? And how can you praise my enemy? And what do you mean by having devotion to him? And then here, Prahlad expounds what is called Bhakti Navalakshanaha, which I would like to give you. That's why I'm taking you into the story of Prahlad. The 9 signs of devotion to the Supreme Lord. This is important for us to know. This is a very famous verse from the Bhagavatam, in which Prahlad is telling Hiranyakashipu what are the signs of devotion, what are the ways in which devotion can be cultivated, and what are the signs of a devotee. So look at the verse. It says, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Vishnu Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atmanivedanam, Iti Pumsar Pita Vishnu, Bhaktische Navalakshanaha. Shravanam, which means hearing the divine qualities of the Supreme Lord. This is Shravan. This is the sign of a true devotee. He relishes talk about God. Today you have asked for bhakti, to hear about bhakti. This itself shows the mind is full of devotion. Otherwise, how will you relish in the talk about the Lord? Kirtanam, singing and praising the Lord. This is an essential sign of the bhakta. Smaranam, constantly thinking about him. See, we always think about whomever we love, isn't it? Check and see in your mind. Spontaneously, naturally, you keep thinking about the people you love. So, is the thought of the divine like this ever recurring naturally, spontaneously in our minds? This is Smaranam. This is a sign of true devotion. Then, Vishnu Pada Sevanam, worshipping the feet of the Supreme Lord. Some kind of seva. Seva will naturally remove the ego. It is a way of showing your bhakti to the Supreme Lord. If this is practiced every day, then the impressions of bhakti become very strong in the mind. So Pada Sevanam, some small form of worship can be practiced by many of you every day. If you do it even after a month's time, you will understand its impact on your mind. I always recommend, in fact, when I was in South Africa, I taught them a 10-minute puja every day. You just perform some kind of a seva to the Lord in your special niche which you have kept for spiritual practice. And you see, you naturally, the flow of emotion you can feel there towards the divine. So you grow by all this. That is why Pada Sevanam has been mentioned here. One who has tasted puja, the bliss of puja, the emotion of puja, will understand the power of ritual, some small ritual even in your life. An act daily repeated as an expression of devotion. It elevates the mind. Today in modern life, many times people are removed from all this. So then they have all sorts of emotional problems and they don't know how to tackle their emotions. You have to culture the positive emotions, noble emotions in these ways. This is what puja was meant for, isn't it? It gives you emotional health, emotional intelligence. Today when we say karma hi puja hai, you have not tasted puja, how will you say karma is puja? The sheer elevation of a simple ritual done with full devotion has to be tasted. So that is why Pada Sevanam has been mentioned. Then Archanam. Archanam also is the same thing. Vandana and puja. And chanting his names along with that. Vandanam is bowing down to him. Once you bow down to the highest ideal, you will, that same head will not go down to anything cheap. You naturally establish your system of values. This is natural value education actually. So Vandanam, bow down to him who is really worth going down to. Then Dasyam, an attitude of service, a servant-like attitude towards the Supreme. What can I do for you? That attitude. Sakhyam, deep friendship. See what we don't do with our friends. With our buddies, we are completely open, isn't it? We share with them everything that, whatever is there in our mind, we share it with them. So, Sakhyam means this. Have this with the Lord. The attitude of deep friendship. Even if you look upon him as mother, father, whatever. This is common, a friendly attitude. After a certain age, mother becomes a great friend, isn't it? Father becomes friend. So, this attitude. Then Atma Nivedanam, surrender of yourself to him. Even if you utter it once a day, I surrender myself to you, it has a purifying effect on your system. This attitude of deep surrender, naturally. And then Iti Pumsarpitam Vishnu Bhakti She Navalakshmi. These are the 9 signs of devotion. So see if you are practicing this in your life. Because if you are not practicing these are the steps, small steps you can take to inculcate, to bring bhakti into your life. So Prahlad is explaining this to Hiranyakashipu. Now how will this Asura king, who actually hates Vishnu, how will he accept this? So now he is all enraged. And he says, what are you saying? You deserve to be put to death. Now I am not going to spare you anymore. So he tries all sorts of ways to put Prahlad to death. You may be knowing it. He makes him sit at a spot and elephants are let loose to trample him to death. But nothing happens. Snakes are let loose to bite him to death. But nothing happens. And then he is made to sit in fire. Holika actually, who could not be burnt by fire. So she sits with Prahlad on her lap and the fire is set on fire. But Holika perishes, nothing happens to Prahlad. He's pushed from the top of a mountain. And the divine hands of Vishnu, they protect him, they save him. So nothing is able to destroy this child. He's fed with poison, but nothing happens. So it is clearly seen that the divine is protecting Prahlad. Now Hiranyakashipu is all the more angry and he says, you say your Vishnu is everywhere. He is the all-pervading one. Is he in this pillar? And he kicks that pillar in his palace. Katham, the Sanskrit there is nice. Katham stambena drishyate. Will I not find him here? Show him in this pillar. And he kicks the pillar and immediately the Narsimha avatar of Vishnu comes out of that pillar. Which means Lord Vishnu in the form of half lion and half man. The head of a lion, the body of a man, and he pulls Hiranyakashipu to the threshold of that room because you see all those boons. I should be killed by neither man nor beast. So half man, half beast. I should be killed neither inside a room nor outside. So on the threshold and without any weapon. And it was twilight hour, neither day nor night. And with his nails, with no weapons, he rips open Hiranyakashipu's stomach and kills him. And then this Narsimha avatar, which is actually Ugramurti, it is a ferocious form of the divine. So God sent Prahlad, and as soon as Narsimha avatar sees Prahlad, he melts because this child is so divine. And he says, my child, ask a boon of me. What do you want? And Prahlad says, I am your servant. I am not a businessman. I don't want anything in exchange. So, still, to honor your word, I pray to you only for this. Make me completely desireless. see that I never ask for anything other than bhakti in my life. See, whoever has asked for such a boon, give me this boon that I may never ask for anything. Fill me with devotion to you. This is all I want. So again, he is showing us the state of mind required in deep level devotion. It is simply free of everything. Only love. Nothing else is there in that mind. So then Narsimha Avatar is very pleased, and then he grants Prahlad this boon. And so that is why Prahlad then becomes the king of the Asuras, but a very ideal king. And he rules for many years full of devotion. And he is a great icon of inspiration on his devotional path. As one who, right from childhood, supremely dedicated himself to Vishnu. So this is the story of Prahlad, where we see the signs of bhakti, the 9 signs of bhakti. Now, when Sri Ramakrishna tells us about holy company and prayer, let me give you another example from our scriptures to show you how these work in the lives of the devotee. And here again, we will be introduced to the very important 9 steps of bhakti. This is the story of Shabari, which I am going to tell you next. Because here you have the Navavidha Bhakti. In the Ramayana, it's a very important thing, where Sri Ram himself explains to Bhakti what are the 9 steps of Bhakti, gaining which a man attains the supreme goal of human life. So this is given to us in the story of this very humble woman called Shabari. She was actually the daughter of a hunter. And she, right from childhood, she had great devotion to holy people, towards the Lord. And it so happened that there was a great rishi called Matanga Muni, who was practicing austerities in a forest. So when Shabari's father tried to marry her away into some home, she ran away from there and came to this Matanga Muni's ashram, and she would every day clean up the whole ashram and remove all the leaves, bring wood for his yajnas and stack them, do all these services, and she remained hidden. Then one day Matanga Muni asked, who is it who's doing all this? And then they brought this huntress, this young girl, and he asked, who are you and why are you doing all this for me? And she said, I want to live a life of devotion. I don't want to marry and live a householder's life. So please save me, let me remain in this ashram, and I will do all these duties and I will develop my inner life of devotion. Please bless me with devotion. So Matanga Muni was so pleased with her that he kept her in the ashram, and she continued to do this seva, and he initiated her into spiritual life, and she became such a great sadhika that when Matanga Muni was going to leave his body, he blessed her, saying that I bless you that in this very life you will have your Ishta Darshan. He initiated her into the Rama Mantra, the name of Sri Ram, and he told her that you will have the Pratyaksha Darshan, the actual vision of Sri Ram in this very life. He will come to you actually in a physical form. And he left his kutia for her spiritual practice, and he gave up his body in Samadhi. Now this Shabari, as a young woman, dived into spiritual practice. She was steeped in spiritual practice. And because her guru had told her, one day Sri Ram will come to you, you will have his darshan. Every day morning she would wake up and she would think, what if the Lord comes today? So let me get ready quickly. And she would clean her house. She would clean the yard in front of her house and the path to her gate. And she would go to the forest and bring flowers from there and put them on that path so that the feet of the Lord are on something soft. Every day she would bring petals of flowers and strew them on that path, keep it very pure and clean throughout the day, and sit at her doorstep and wait, watch the gate and see if he's coming, if Sri Ram is coming to her kutir. And then again, afternoon she would go to the forest and bring berries and stack them and keep that if my Lord comes in the afternoon or in the evening, I'll feed him. And how did she keep them? She would taste them. And the sweetest berries she would keep. So look at the beauty of her devotion, childlike devotion. Nobody offers fruit which is already eaten to the Lord, isn't it? But Shabri did all of this just out of the intensity of her devotion. See, don't try to imitate this. Even there's another devotee called Kannappa who did the same thing actually. And Shabri also did this. So their devotion is of a very high degree, which makes them go beyond all these rules and regulations. So Shabri's devotion was like this, that day after day, month after month, year after year, she did this. Just waiting for her Lord with all this preparation and constantly taking his name on her Japamala, sitting there at her doorstep and watching the gate to see if Sri Ram is coming that day. And when it was night, she would say, oh, today he did not come, tomorrow he will come, because my Guru has said. So what a beautiful state of mind, you see. Like this, she spent her entire life, and in the evening of her life, when she was quite old, one day Sri Ram and Lakshman came there. As you know, they were searching for Sita. And before they met Sugriv, because she gave them the intimation, the news of Sugriv, before he met them, before Sri Ram met Sugriv and the other Vanaras, he came to Shabri. And as soon as he came at her doorstep, at her gate, she at once recognized the Lord. Because who but a devotee will recognize the Lord? The aura, the divine aura around Sri Ram, and the beautiful lotus-like face, those eyes streaming full of love and bliss, and that very tender frame, radiating power and bliss. It can only be Sri Ram. So she rushed out and made the Lord come into her home, her hut, and she cleaned his feet with the tears from her eyes. Because before she could get water to wash his feet, the tears in her eyes were rolling so fast that that was sufficient to wash his feet. Then she made him sit, and then she gave him fruits to eat, those berries and those fruits which she had got and tasted herself, and the sweetest which she had kept, she offered that, and Sri Ram happily started eating that. Lakshman did not like it because he understood. But looking at Sri Ram, he also started eating it. So this is the play of devotion between the Lord and the devotee. The tears in her eyes, she watched over them, she fanned them. Then she gave them news of Sugriv and how to approach him, where to go. And then, before they were going to depart, she told them, please instruct me in bhakti. And that is when Sri Ram gives her this Navavidha Bhakti. You should just note these points, because this is a very important part of our bhakti literature. How to develop bhakti, what are the 9 steps of bhakti. Again, you will find points repeated here. The first step of bhakti, Sri Ram says, is sadhu sang, the company of the holy. Then he says, concentrate and listen to the divine leela of the Lord, what is called Gatha Shravan. In Tulsi Ramcharitmanas also you will get all these points. This is the famous Navavidha Bhakti, told by Sri Ram himself to Shabari. Then he says, Tyaja Abhimana Guru Seva, which means give up all sorts of egoism, all its manifestations, and serve the Guru wholeheartedly. Because it is only through service that the mind can completely change. Then, Nishkapat Gunagan of the Lord. It will help you taste what is called Rama Rasayan if this kind of Gunagan is done. With a pure heart, without any doubt, without any reservations, without any shyness, if you can sing the name of the Lord. Sri Ramakrishna used to say the same thing, isn't it? Why should you feel shy in taking the name of the Lord, in dancing with in the Lord's name? Why should you feel shy, he would say. So you see, same thing is put here. Then Vishwas, Japa Nirantar, in deep faith, to take the name of the Lord continuously. Because his name has great power, it will naturally invoke bhakti. Then Indriya Nigraha Charita Ujjwal, which means a great character basically, through self-control, through sense control. As long as our senses are exposed to all sorts of things, it will only harm bhakti in your heart. A little control of all of this, because our ahar is through all the senses. You control them a bit, expose yourself to all the good things, all the divine things in life. Listen to His glories, see His form, perform work as a offering to Him, associate with people who are of this type, and it is possible to develop bhakti. Then, Jagat Ramamai, to see this whole world as being pervaded with the Lord. So you see, a bhakta will not label and remove things from his experience. He will not hate. He will not be angry, because he sees the world is Ramamaya. He sees the divine in everything. So any kind of strong negative emotion is removed by all this. In this is included sadhu, santa seva, man, tyag, all this is included in Ramcharitmanas, which means a devotee is naturally oriented towards seva, because love is what love does, and there is no sense of ego. And then santosh, contentment, and nirdosh man, which means unable to see the faults of others even in a dream. This is the sign of devotion. Fault finders can never develop bhakti. Then saral prakriti nishchal vyavahar. Sri Ramakrishna used to say this as manmukh adkara, which means very pure, simple hearted. And thus, keeping your faith intact, you transcend the dualities of life. Just by these simple disciplines of everyday life, Sri Ram says to Shabri, you can reach the highest level of devotion. These are the 9 steps of bhakti. So you see, all that we intend to learn in Bhakti Yoga is here, how to cultivate bhakti. These 9 steps are the methods to cultivate bhakti. So in Sri Ramakrishna's words, you will find all of this, what the scriptures are saying, all of that. You see, the very essence of this has been put into the 6 points which I gave you initially as Sri Ramakrishna's words for the cultivation of bhakti. As soon as Sri Ram utters these words to Shabri, she with great devotion and tears in her eyes, she accepts this Navavidha Bhakti, and then she leaves her body and goes to her Guru. It is said that she left her body and went to her Guru and developed the highest state of devotion possible. Para Bhakti Bhakti. So this is the story of Shabri, and the 6 points for devotion which Sri Ramakrishna gives us sums up how we can cultivate bhakti. Please remember those 6 points. I will just mention them and I will stop. We can take up the Q&A for the next 10 minutes. Repeating his name and singing his glories, first. Second, going into solitude now and then. Discriminating between the real and the unreal. Prayer, holy company. Uniting all your powers of love and surrendering them to the Lord. These are the 6 steps to bhakti. Okay, come on. I finish my talk here and let's take up your Q&A. Let me open my speaker.
But can you help clarify or reinforce how the tangible impact of the 6 steps of bhakti as an instrument to manifest the divinity within, as Vivekananda says?
How do these 6 steps help us manifest divinity?
Right.
So these 6 steps are actually very practical steps given for us to develop devotion on an everyday basis. Please see, every day you can practice each of these steps. You can practice prayer, you can practice the stuti, you can practice surrender to the Lord. So by doing this, gradually what happens is, the most important thing which happens is it divinizes your personality. Doesn't it do that? Devotion to the Lord? It divinizes you yourself. It brings those sanskars into your mind which are required for the higher life. So when it divinizes your personality, gradually you become like that. You know, actually speaking, the psychological part of bhakti is, what you love, you are going to become like that. Whomever you love, you are going to become like that. Children show this in a very nice way by just imitating whatever they love. Isn't it? We may not exactly imitate, but we, in unconscious ways, we manifest. Whatever we love, we are going to become like that. So then when you are going to love the Lord through all these means, you will manifest divinity within your life, in your life. Naturally, what does divinity constitute? A very beautiful, pure mind. Great knowledge from within. Great devotion. A kind of fellow feeling, love towards all. Deep compassion, kindness. The sheer goodness of the human heart. All that will come into natural manifestation. Only through bhakti. Don't think that jnanis don't have bhakti. They don't talk about it, that's all. But they are also full of bhakti.
Am I on? Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Namaste, Swamiji. I'm sorry, Arnavataji. One thing that always concerns me is that all these things are very nice to carry out, and I enjoy doing selfless service as much as I can. And I ask Sri Krishna to give me those chances. But in this Kali Yuga, you have to keep the story of the Mahut and his mad elephant. You know the story, right? So sometimes we're not all Sri Krishna, Jesus, or Buddhas. So if we don't keep that in mind, in a householder's life, I find that very difficult. I can let go and not associate with some such people who deplete my meditative energy, which I've been meditating for 10 years. So I always keep that in mind. I do not, and thereby protect my own aura that I have collected. And so how do we balance this? That's my question. Mahut and his mad elephant.
Important question actually. That
Go ahead.
Can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Yeah, now can you hear me?
Yes.
So the question is, you see, there are all types of people who even deplete your positive energy. And so how do we are discussing about seeing the whole world as Ramamaya, but how do you deal with these type of people, and what kind of a relation do you form with them? So the thing is this, see, when Sri Ramakrishna also would give this advice, when we are spiritual aspirants, it is important to build a kind of hedge, kind of fence around us until we grow in devotion. So it is important to keep to positive people, it is important to keep to positive spaces, it is important to cultivate our devotion. This is very important. And once the sapling has become a tree, quite strong and large, and then you can embrace everyone and nothing will happen to you. So this distinction has to be made especially in this Bhakti Marg, because devotion is to be cultivated until it becomes really strong and complete, and then really you will see everything as a manifestation of the divine. Until then, you protect yourself in a way from negative energies.
By
Otherwise, you get
not associating with them and staying with the satsangi people, the like-minded people. Is that what you're saying?
yes, right, right. As far as it is possible. Hello? We are not able to hear.
No, Shikha has a question. Abhay has a question, baby. Okay, Shikha can, yeah.
Mataji, this is Shikha and Pradeep from North Carolina. We do wish and we would like to have you in the center, hearing you physically one-to-one in a lecture, but I don't know when that will happen. But my question is that as a householder, I believe that the Bhakti Yoga is the most important yoga that we have to follow, with a little combination of Gyan Yoga, Raj Yoga, and Karma Yoga. I feel that that's the comprehensive way we can proceed to the spiritual life. I have been initiated in 2002, and before that also, I liked everything that is spiritual, whether it is a hymn, whether it's a book, whether it's a photo, with whatever. But since initiation, I have been practicing the spiritual rituals and the practices on a daily basis. And as I'm advancing, little things that I'm going on adding, and that I feel that I am progressing, because that urge to include little more time, a little more this ritual, little more that ritual, is a positive sign. Recently, I heard your YouTube, this thing on Gayatri Mantra, the importance, the significance. And most recently, I have added that into the ritual of reciting. I cannot do it 108 times, but I have divided into 3 sessions of 12 chant, and which you said in your lecture that is okay if I can start with that. And now the other mantra that I was thinking about is the Mrityunjay mantra. Now, if you can give me a little bit of knowledge about what is Mrityunjay mantra, and will that intensify my devotion more?
Yeah. Any mantra, Mrityunjay mantra is Om Trambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarupameva Bandhanat Mrityunmukshyamamrita. Even this is a very powerful mantra towards Lord Shiva. So this mantra actually prevents all akala mrityu, what is called. That is early death, early disease, any kind of negative energy, negative influence on life, obstacles on the spiritual path. It removes all of this. So it's a very powerful mantra. Whether you use Gayatri or Mrityunjay mantra, you must stick to one. If you are already initiated, you must stick to your mantra of initiation.
Yeah.
You must stick to that one. This is additional. Suppose you like Gayatri, you can do it in addition to that, but you must stick to the mantra of your initiation and deepen that. I would request you to do this. Deepen the mantra which you have received during initiation. Let your spiritual practice be more focused on that.
Mm-hmm.
Because getting something from a guru is a very powerful thing. And the name which has been given to you, the Bij mantras have been added to that name. So it has a tremendous effect on you if you carry on your spiritual practices regularly. And in addition to that, you can do Mahamrityunjay mantra and Gayatri mantra. No problem. But don't leave out the main initiation.
Yeah, no.
Abhay has a question.
We have Manoj. Manoj, you can ask a question now. You have to unmute yourself.
Pranam Mataji, can you hear me? I just want to check my mic was not working.
Please, I can hear.
Okay, thank you. So, Pranam, and my question is, what is the best way to get started on the path of bhakti and meditation? I'm a complete novice.
The best way to get started on the path of bhakti is prayer. Suppose you feel you don't have bhakti and I should get started on it, you pray for bhakti. You know, Sri Ramakrishna was a very, very practical spiritual teacher. He would say, suppose you doubt the presence of God, then you can always pray whether you are there or not, please let me know. So whatever you want, you pray for it, and that is getting started with it. Ask for it. Knock and it shall be opened, it is said. Try it and see.
Okay, so it's like, you know, and this is the dilemma, like you start praying,
Yes.
but it is like, how do you get the full attention into it? That's a next step. So like, what would you suggest would be the best way? Like, you know what, okay, asking for it, yes, agreed. But is there like I also heard your Gayatri mantra, so I'm doing that 12 in the morning. Is that a good way to start? And then my add-on question would be like, how do I get initiated with you guys? That's the last one I have.
So it is very good that you are doing the Gayatri mantra, but always please remember, one has to get initiated into a mantra. You don't just pick it up from here and there, from a book, from a video. So initiation is a regular process which is given in many of the Vedanta centers there. So you just have to approach one of the, even Ushadi will be able to guide you in this. Ushaji, she will.
What is
No, no, no.
I missed a little bit. I had to go out for a minute. What is the question?
Regarding initiation.
Oh, yes. We have Swami Sarvadevanandi coming. Of course, he will not come now, but he does come once a year or maybe sometimes twice a year. So if you, contact me, I will have your name on the list and it will be done when he comes.
Okay, so till then, like, should I not do the Gayatri
No.
mantra?
Definitely, you please continue to do the Gayatri mantra. There's no harm in that. And you can also continue to do it even after your initiation. But the main mantra which you receive in initiation will be the mantra of your spiritual practice.
Okay.
Gayatri will be in addition to that, as I just said to addition to your regular mantra practice, you can practice the Gayatri. Suppose you don't take initiation, then you can continue with the Gayatri. But it is always better to take initiation because you are ushered into a particular spiritual process with a mantra from a guru, and the guru Shakti goes in the initiation process. So this is a great help in spiritual life.
Manoj, where do you live?
North Carolina.
Okay, good. So you know our center.
I live in Charlotte, so it is in Raleigh. I have found out in Raleigh, and that's where I found out about this Zoom meeting, and
Good.
that's why I connected to this.
So you can send us a message. We'll let you know the details. Okay.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you.
Good.
And is there any, like, you know, any other way to contact like Mataji and anyone else, like, you know, through emails or something like that, or like chat or something? Because
Yeah.
now, because of the times we are in, that's the only reason. Otherwise, I would love to visit the center.
If you contact me, I'll give you the contacts. I will give you the telephone numbers of the Swami so you can contact. Okay.
We can take it up in the chat. Okay,
Okay.
we have Abhay. Abhay has a question.
Namaste, Mataji. I'm from North Carolina. I have a question. In Bhakti Yoga, you mentioned control the senses. Can you help us? This is very difficult. So guide us how to control the senses.
See, this is the spiritual practice meant to purify the mind, because the input to the senses is what is creating the thoughts, the vrittis in your mind. Isn't this true? Check and see what you see throughout the day, what you have been seeing, that is creating your thoughts. Today you saw a movie, and for the whole next week you were brooding about something about the movie that was going on in your mind. So your senses are sort of inlets for impressions taking place in your mind. So when things, the input is from the senses, if you guard these, what you see, what you hear, what you speak, if these are well guarded and they take in only positive stuff, it will change the content of your mind. This is called controlling the senses.
Thank you.
Indriya Nigrah. So what do we do practically? We see good things, auspicious things, things which will broaden your mind and intellect. You will hear good music, divine music, the name of the Lord, chanting about the Lord, praises of the Lord. You also indulge in this only when you speak. Practicing in this way. Practically, if you do this, it enables control of senses and changing the vrittis of your mind, because the thoughts that you create there through your sense input, that is going to create your sanskars further. What you repeatedly think is going to become your sanskar. So now you know how to change your thoughts and how to change your sanskars. It starts with Indriya Nigraha. That's why it's considered so important in our scriptures.
So what happens nowadays, we live in internet world. The moment we open the computer, we see so many unwanted things which divert the mind. And that creates a lot of problem. It is difficult to control. You don't see, it pops up. So that disturbs the mind.
Yes, for that, I don't know, you have to invent some practical remedy. Stay riveted on your goals, and all this will just, it won't affect you that much.
Okay, thank you.
We have Alka. Alka, you can ask your question now.
Salutations at your lotus feet, Mataji. This is an absolute honor to hear you live. I had a quick clarification I needed, please. You talked about the 9 symptoms or signs of devotion to the Supreme Lord. So I think I think I missed one. I've got Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Pad Sevanam, Bandhanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, and Atma Nivedam. There are just 8 I have. Is the one I missed?
Archana.
Archana. I have Archana.
Archana is
Chanting. Chanting. Going down.
worship. Archana is worship with the chanting of the names of the Lord. Archana.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Deepak.
Mataji, I have a question actually regarding the 9 steps of bhakti. Some of the steps actually are more physical activity, something we can do, something to, but the question is self-control is a function of the mind. And the fact is that we are born with sanskaras, and that drives our tendencies. And also the question is, how do you overcome those tendencies in the moment of impulses and everything else, and exercise self-control?
It's a good question, you see. Many of these disciplines have to do with physical activity, but our impressions are in our mind. Now your body affects your mind. This has to be taken into consideration. That is why, you know, in Bhakti Shastras, they say, Rishikena Rishikeshasya Sevanam Bhakti Riti Uchyate. In the Narada Pancharatra, this is there, which means through your senses, you worship the Lord of the senses. Rishikesha is the Lord of the senses. the Supreme Lord, Vishnu, Krishna, whoever. And how do you worship him? Through the senses. By purifying these senses, as I told you, when you take in the sense impression, the sense input, if it is positive, gradually the contents of your conscious mind will go on becoming positive. But we have also come with past impressions. Our subconscious may be full of a whole lot of negative things. How do we change that? So you see, the actual thing is your conscious mind. You can get control over it. As I told you, the sense input, keep it clean, and the conscious mind will change its ways. It will become very super fine, subtle, pure. Now, these vrittis of the conscious mind, when they are repeated, they go into the subconscious mind and create what are called your sanskars. So no matter what was already there in the subconscious mind, if you keep putting in clean water from the conscious mind, it will change whatever the content there. It will dilute it, it will transform it. And further, it again pops up in your conscious mind as memories, the contents of your subconscious. This cycle goes on day and night. This is part of Patanjali Yoga Sutras. So no matter what is there in the subconscious, you can change it gradually over a period of time by constant positive input into the system. Just like I give the example of an ink bottle. I think Swami Yatishwaranji Maharaj used to give this example. Suppose there's an ink bottle which was used to keep ink, but now you have thrown out the ink and you want to clean the bottle. What would you do? You first start pouring fresh water, and what will you get? You will get dark water only, because it is already lined with ink. Then you throw out that water, again pour fresh water, again throw out the water. At some point of time, after some time, you will get good water only. The bottle will be clean. So you taking, now the bottle is the mind, and it is full of dark stuff, but you poured it out. Now you have committed yourself to a life of bhakti, of jnana, of knowledge and devotion. Now you take in the positive stuff continuously. It will go on changing that. Initially a little dark water might come out. Don't get frightened by that. That is the process of change of mind. And then gradually, at some point, as you go on pouring in positivity, only positivity will come out.
Mataji, just so I understand you correctly, are you saying this whole process, which is really a marathon rather than a sprint, that all self-control and all the things are going to come through, what I call is the spiritual process actually, which is, I'm initiated. So basically going to the mantras and everything else, the japa, that in turn basically clears up everything. Is that right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Process. And you can do it along with seva. See, how you use your body, your hands and feet, if you are using them as a devotional practice, what do you do? Every day, some form of seva to elders, to the guru, to sadhus, to the Lord in establishing your shrine. So you are using your hands and feet and your senses to actually serve the Lord. So that way, they themselves find the sanskars in your mind. So all of this, it's one unit, body-mind complex. Changing the ways of the body will change the mind. So that's why Pada Sevanam, all this has been prescribed. Worship has to be done. Try it and see, and you will know the impact on the mind.
Mataji, you have been very generous with your time. Are you sure you want to stay on? It's your dinner time.
Another 2 minutes maybe.
Okay.
A question from Saurav.
Okay.
Saurav Chakraborty.
Yes, Pranam Mataji. So I'm from Bengal, from India, and I'm just staying besides the Belur Math. But actually, I have one question regarding my devotional practice. And actually, as Ramakrishna and you, every time in your talk, it is repeatedly we come to know like it's a kind of constant practice. But when I personally trying to suppress, our emotions and thought process, because it is like a untamed horse, as Ramakrishna explained in his Kathamrita, but we are trying to control it. So how much we should force our mind to control it, because it's a kind of process, and sometimes I feel challenge because it's something like you are trying to dominate and suppress your own innate property, something like phenotypic property. So that is my question, like how long we supposed to force myself and when are we supposed to stop, and how could we continue with that process in an ease way, and how would I actually get that kind of feeling and continue with my devotional life?
So see, it's an important question again. But it's not a matter of suppression or repression or force. All that we are asking for is create the habits required for the higher life. Then you will see you don't have to actually apply force. The habit that you create by continuously doing one particular thing, say Shravanam, Padasevanam, some worship form, little japa, meditation, the habits of life that you create, a sattvic kind of lifestyle, this itself will usher in devotional mood into you. So we are asking for this lifestyle changes, not forcefully in the act of meditation to suppress your thoughts and make sure that no emotion pops up. That kind of a force we are not talking of at all, because you can't control the mind that way. We are asking for lifestyle changes, small changes, creating good habits of meditation, a sattvic lifestyle, and sadhu sang, keeping close to holy company. Doing all this will naturally bring in sattvic states of mind, meditative moods, good bhav. Amra boli na, bhav niye kotha. If you get good bhav in your mind, good emotional disposition, naturally bhakti grows. So all this is to be cultivated through these practices which we discussed just now, but not forcefully trying to suppress something and trying to cultivate something. There's no force in spiritual life, actually speaking. It's a gradual, graded process of transformation. And you have the great advantage of being close to Belur Math. You said you are just beside Belur Math. There's no greater blessing than this in life.
I was there actually. Right now I am at North Carolina. So my house is just besides the Belur Math. I used to go over there. I met a lot of Swamijis over there. Still I am actually in touch with them. But sometimes I lost in my, because I am a PhD student in North Carolina University, and maintaining both life, my academic life and spiritual life. Sometimes, it's very challenging. I like to follow the path of devotional because from my probably 10 years from my after graduations from India, I'm right now 33 years old. So you can imagine. So 15 years I am with Dr. Lord Ramakrishna. I really, but sometimes I lost in my way, and I try to figure it out that how could I get peace in my mind to get more confident on my spiritual way. But your suggestions, I always watch your YouTube video sometimes whenever I have a time. And I think you are right. I will follow in that way. Thanks for your great advice. Right? Pranam, take my pranam.
Thank you, Mata. Do you have time? Can we take one more person?
Okay.
Arnav, you can.
Pranam, Mataji. Thank you for the great talk that you had shared with all of us today. I think my question is, it's about like keeping a calm mind. Whenever I see the Swamijis and obviously I see you, I see a very permanent sense of joy in your mind, right this minute. And I want to also achieve that at some point of time in my life. But as I said, like everybody here is spot on, like asking questions about, it's about controlling your mind. But I think I'm just thinking like, how do you keep your mind calm and have one sense of joy always, so that you can be very humble and also very nice to everyone around you, which is very important. And since we are all have a Shri Krishna within us, so just to make sure that we do not trouble him, who's living inside us.
So the conclusion is happiness is a state of mind. If you take care of your mind, your happiness is guaranteed. Isn't it?
Yes. But that's the hard part. And as everybody is struggling, so am I. We have a lot of emotions. Every human has a lot of emotions. Mostly we are dealing with like sad emotions and happy emotions. We like to stick more with the happy emotions, but less with the sad emotions. But again, Shri Krishna and Gita did say that both emotions are just emotion. You just have to be neutral to both of them. However, it's not practically possible in the lifestyle that we live in. And that makes our life a little bit more complicated. And we have to live in this world, absorb all the negative energies sent or thrown at us, and try to be positive. So
I would like to recommend, there's a book I have just released called Science of Happiness. So I will be sending a whole lot of copies to Mary Tamras, and you can order from there. And this book will help you. Science of Happiness according to Yoga Vedanta.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I can't thank you enough, but you're not off the hook.